The silence was a physical thing in the grand hall, a pressure against Elena's ears. It was not the absence of sound, the air was thick with the murmur of voices, the rustle of silk against stone, the delicate clink of crystal goblets, but the absence of sound directed at her. She stood near a marble column, its cold seeping through the velvet of her gown, a fixed and pleasant smile on her face. It was the smile she had perfected over the past year, one that was meant to convey serene belonging, a queen at ease in her husband's court. The smile was a lie, and she felt its falsity like a mask tightening around her face. The vampire court of Ethelgard moved with a languid grace that was centuries old. The ladies, with their pale, luminous skin and eyes that held the depth of ancient nights, formed elegant constellations of conversation. They spoke of politics that predated her great-grandparents, of art commissioned by forgotten dynasties, of memories as sharp as the day they were formed 200 years ago. Their laughter was like the chiming of tiny, cold bells. When Elena approached, the constellations would subtly shift. A space would not be made. A conversation would not open to include her. Instead, the circle would seem to solidify, its edges becoming smooth and impenetrable. They would offer her polite nods, their smiles as thin as spun glass, before turning back to one another, their voices dropping just enough to exclude her once more. Tonight, Lady Serafina was holding court near the hearth, her silver hair braided with pearls. She was telling a story about the winter ball of 1288, and the other ladies listened, rapt. Elena knew better than to draw near. The last time she had, Serafina had paused, looked at her with a gaze of polite inquiry, and said, "Your Majesty," in a tone that was both a greeting and a dismissal. The conversation had then died, a candle snuffed out, until Elena had murmured an excuse and retreated. The moment her back was turned, the chiming laughter had resumed. It was not overt cruelty. It was worse. It was the quiet, constant, and complete certainty that she did not, and could not, belong. She was human. A fragile, fleeting creature whose heart beat a frantic, temporary rhythm in a hall of beautiful, silent predators. Her warmth was an intrusion in their elegant coolness. Her mortality was a subject of morbid curiosity, not shared experience. She took a sip of wine she did not want, the liquid cool against her throat. Her husband, King Sebastian, stood across the hall, deep in conversation with his military advisers. He was magnificent, his power a tangible aura that shaped the very air around him. He was a vampire, yes, but he was hers, and she was his. He loved her. She never doubted his love, which was a fierce and protective thing. But his love could not breach the walls of this court. He could command their loyalty, their obedience, their lives. He could not command them to like his human wife. He did not seem to understand the difference. He saw her at his side during official functions, saw the polite bows and formal greetings, and he believed she was accepted. He did not see the moments in between. He did not feel the weight of the silence. A space finally opened near her, and Lady Isolde, a younger vampire with eyes the color of twilight, turned. For a breathtaking second, Elena's heart lifted with a desperate flutter of hope. "Perhaps this time." "Your Majesty," Isolde said, her voice smooth. "That is a lovely color on you. Is it Valois silk?" "It is," Elena said, her smile feeling suddenly genuine. "A gift from my sister." "Ah, yes. Your human sister." The words were not unkind, but they landed like a stone, reminding her of the unbridgeable gulf. How quaint. Isolde's gaze drifted past Elena's shoulder, her attention already snared by another, more interesting conversation. The opening closed. The constellation reformed. Elena was alone again, an island in a sea of immortal faces. The ache of it was a familiar companion, a hollow space in her chest that no amount of royal privilege could fill. She was the Queen of Ethelgard, and she had never felt more profoundly, excruciatingly lonely. She remained by her column for another hour, a beautiful statue in a velvet gown, listening to the sound of a world to which she would never truly belong, the smile on her face a perfect, heartbreaking lie. From across the hall, Sebastian watched his wife. He saw the elegant line of her back, the gentle curve of her neck as she sipped her wine, the placid smile she offered to anyone who happened to glance her way. To most observers, she was the picture of regal composure. But Sebastian had spent a century learning to read the subtle currents of the living, and he had spent the last 2 years studying Elena. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the stem of her goblet just a little too tightly. He saw the smile that never quite reached her eyes. Most of all, he saw the spaces around her, the empty air where conversation should have been, the subtle turning of backs, the polite but firm exclusion that followed her like a shadow. His jaw tightened. He loved her more than he had loved anything in his long, unchanging life. Her warmth, her vibrancy, her ridiculously fast-beating heart, it was all a kind of music to him, a song of life that had chased away the silent monotony of his own existence. Seeing her diminished by the cold civility of his court was a constant, grating irritation. He had tried addressing it. In the early months, he had made pointed efforts to draw her into conversations, placing a possessive hand on her waist and steering her toward a group. The ladies would pause, offer her their brittle smiles, and answer her questions with courteous brevity. But the moment his attention was diverted, the invisible wall would rise again. He could not stand beside her every second of every day. He knew the problem. They saw her as a curiosity, a temporary indulgence. A human queen. The very concept was an oxymoron to them. Queens were supposed to endure, to rule for centuries, to be partners in immortality. Elena was a summer rose in a forest of ancient oaks. They were not cruel to her, not in a way he could punish. They were simply waiting. Waiting for her to fade, to wither, to be replaced by someone more suitable, more permanent. Their politeness was a form of cruelty more insidious than any open insult. It was the slow, steady erosion of her spirit. He excused himself from his advisers, his mind churning. He could issue an edict, of course. You will include the queen. You will engage her in conversation. You will be her friends. The thought was absurd. Friendship could not be commanded. Forced companionship would be even more humiliating for her than this polite isolation. No, the solution needed to be more subtle. He needed to fix the symptom, because he could not, he believed, fix the cause. The cause was their nature, and hers. He could not make them see her as an equal, not truly. But he could alleviate her loneliness. He could give her a companion. His gaze swept the hall, cataloguing the faces, assessing. He needed someone intelligent, discreet, and in need of something he could provide. His eyes settled on Lady Cassandra. She was from an old but impoverished house, her family's lands having dwindled over the last century through a series of poor investments. She was clever, observant, and she kept to the fringes of the court's inner circle, making her less entrenched in its rigid hierarchies. She was also pragmatic. She would understand a transaction. The idea solidified, a perfect, logical solution. He would not be commanding friendship. He would be purchasing a service. The service of companionship. He would pay Lady Cassandra to seek Elena out, to engage her, to become her confidant. She would break the ice, and perhaps, once the other ladies saw Elena with a companion of their own kind, they would begin to thaw. He was not buying a friend for his wife, he was creating a bridge. And once the bridge was built, it would stand on its own. It was a good plan. It was a kind plan. It was, he thought with a surge of satisfaction, the perfect application of a king's power to solve a deeply personal problem. He felt a wave of relief. He would not have to watch his vibrant, beloved Elena slowly fade into a shadow anymore. He would fix this for her. He would give her the gift of a friend, and she would never have to know the cost. He would protect her from the ugliness of the transaction, and she would have only the beautiful result. It was his duty, as her king and as her husband, to solve her problems, even the ones she was too proud to name. The next evening, Lady Cassandra was summoned to the king's private study. The room was panelled in dark wood and smelled of old books and beeswax. Sebastian did not ask her to sit. He stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit gardens, his posture radiating an authority that needed no ceremony. Lady Cassandra, he began, his voice a low murmur. I have a matter of some delicacy I wish to discuss with you. Cassandra inclined her head. Your Majesty, she kept her expression neutral, her mind racing. A summons like this was unusual. She had done nothing to warrant the king's displeasure, nor had she done anything to earn his particular favor. It concerns the Queen, he said, turning from the window. His eyes, the color of dark wine, were intense. I have observed that she finds the court difficult. She is isolated. It displeases me to see her so. Cassandra chose her words with care. Her Majesty is new to our ways. It takes time. Time is a luxury she does not have in the same measure as we do, Sebastian countered, his voice sharp with an emotion Cassandra couldn't quite place. It sounded like a mixture of love and frustration. I wish for her remaining time here to be happy. I wish for her to have a companion. A friend. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. The ladies of the court have been remiss in their duties of welcome. I require someone to rectify this oversight. Understanding began to dawn, cold and transactional. You require someone to befriend the Queen. Precisely, he said, a faint smile touching his lips, pleased with her quick grasp of the situation. I require you to seek her out. Engage her in conversation. Discover her interests. Accompany her on walks, take tea with her. Be the friend to her that the others have failed to be. The silence that followed was heavy with the unspoken part of the arrangement. Cassandra was a noble woman, but her family's poverty was a poorly kept secret. Friendship was not a service one typically offered for hire. As if reading her thoughts, Sebastian moved to his desk and opened a heavy ledger. Your family's estates in the north are heavily mortgaged to the crown, he stated, not as a threat, but as a simple fact. I am prepared to forgive those debts. All of them. Furthermore, a generous stipend will be settled upon your house, sufficient to restore it to its former standing. The offer was staggering. It was freedom. It was the restoration of her family's honor. It was a fortune that would change the course of her life. All for talking to a lonely girl. It felt both absurdly simple and profoundly complicated. She must never know, Sebastian added, his voice hardening. This is a private arrangement between you and me. To her, you will be a new friend, nothing more. If she were ever to learn of this, it would cause her a pain I cannot countenance. Your discretion must be absolute. Do you understand? Cassandra felt a flicker of something uncomfortable, a distaste for the cold mechanics of the deception. She was to be a paid performer in the theater of the Queen's happiness. But then she thought of the debts, of her family's quiet desperation, of the crumbling manor she called home. The choice was not a choice at all. I understand completely, Your Majesty, she said, her voice steady. You have my word. The Queen will have a friend. The first approach happened 2 days later, in the Royal Library. Elena was searching for a book of herbal remedies, the quiet solitude of the shelves a welcome respite from the court's whispering judgment. She felt a presence and turned to see Lady Cassandra standing a few feet away, a hesitant smile on her face. Your Majesty, Cassandra said with a slight curtsy. I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all, Lady Cassandra, Elena replied, her own smile polite but guarded. She prepared herself for the usual brief, hollow exchange. But Cassandra did not retreat. Instead, she gestured to the book in Elena's hand. Giraud's Herbal Compendium. An excellent choice. My grandmother swore by his remedies for winter ailments. The mention of a grandmother, a figure of warmth and memory, was so unexpectedly normal, so human, that Elena was momentarily taken aback. You've read it. Many times, Cassandra said, her smile warming. Though I confess my own attempts at herbalism usually result in something that smells vaguely of burnt cabbage. A small, genuine laugh escaped Elena's lips before she could stop it. It felt like a foreign sound in this place. Mine as well. The conversation flowed from there, easy and unforced. They spoke of books, of the surprising difficulty of growing lavender in the castle's soil, of the merits of different kinds of tea. Cassandra asked questions, real questions, not polite inquiries about Elena's home, her family, her life before she became queen. Elena found herself answering, the words tumbling out as if a dam had broken. For the first time, someone in this court seemed to see her not as a human curiosity or a political symbol, but as a person. When they parted an hour later, Elena felt a lightness in her chest she hadn't realized was missing. It was the fragile, tentative fluttering of hope. Perhaps, she thought, she had been wrong. Perhaps all it took was one person willing to build a bridge. Over the next few weeks, Cassandra became a quiet fixture in Elena's life. She would appear in the tapestry room to admire Elena's work, her presence a silent companionship that was more comforting than any amount of conversation. They took to walking in the gardens in the afternoons, the crisp autumn air a refreshing change from the stuffy formality of the castle. Cassandra had a dry wit and a keen eye for the absurdities of court life, and her quiet observations often made Elena laugh until her sides ached. For Cassandra, the first few encounters were a performance. She kept a mental checklist, ask about the Queen's day, share a personal but inconsequential anecdote, offer a compliment, suggest a shared activity. She was an actress, and the Queen's slow-blooming happiness was a sign of her success. The initial payment from the king had cleared her family's debts, and the relief was so profound it almost absolved her of the guilt. Almost. But a strange thing began to happen. The performance started to feel less like a performance. She found she was genuinely interested in the complex stitches of Elena's tapestry. She truly enjoyed the scent of the late-blooming roses in the garden. Elena's laugh, once just a target metric for her success, became a sound she actively sought to hear, a warm, bright thing in the cold elegance of the castle. One afternoon, as they sat by the fire in Elena's private chambers, a heavy rain lashing against the windows, Elena spoke of her younger sister, Beatrice. She described their childhood, the silly games they played, the fierce loyalty they shared. As she spoke, her face softened, her guard completely down. There was a vulnerability in her expression, a deep well of love and homesickness that she rarely allowed anyone to see. "I miss her terribly," Elena confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Sometimes I feel as though a part of myself is missing, left behind in another country." In that moment, looking at the Queen's unguarded face, Cassandra felt a sharp, painful pang in her chest. It was not pity. It was empathy. The calculated deception she was engaged in suddenly felt monstrous. This good, kind, lonely woman was pouring her heart out to someone whose very presence was a paid transaction. The stipend the king provided felt like 30 pieces of silver, heavy and cold in her conscience. She was not just a companion, she was a lie made flesh, and Elena was building her happiness on that treacherous foundation. "I'm sure she misses you just as much," Cassandra managed to say, her own voice thick with an emotion that was entirely unfeigned. The guilt was no longer a flicker, it was a steady, burning flame. She had been hired to alleviate the Queen's loneliness, but she was now its most intimate and terrible architect. The friendship, for Elena, was a season of impossible warmth in a land of perpetual frost. 6 months passed, melting into a gentle rhythm of shared days. The long, empty hours that had once stretched before her were now filled with the comfortable presence of a friend. The silence of her chambers was now broken by Cassandra's wry commentary on a new courtier's unfortunate choice of doublet, or the soft rustle of pages as they read companionably by the fire. The polite, impenetrable walls of the court no longer seemed so high, because she had someone to stand with her inside them. Her smile was no longer a mask. It was real. Her laughter, once a rare and startled thing, became frequent and easy. She felt herself unfurling, like a flower that had finally found a patch of sun. Sebastian saw the change and was profoundly satisfied. He saw Elena animated, her eyes bright as she recounted a story Cassandra had told her. He saw them walking in the gardens, their heads bent together in conversation. His plan had worked. His wife was happy. The cost was a secret he would gladly bear for her. He saw nothing of the shadow growing in Cassandra's heart. That shadow was becoming a suffocating weight. Every genuine smile from Elena was a fresh indictment. Every shared confidence was a twist of the knife. The friendship, for Cassandra, had ceased to be a job. It had become real. She cared for Elena, deeply and truly. She admired her resilience, her quiet grace, her unwavering kindness in the face of so much coldness. She loved her. And that love made the lie unbearable. The guilt manifested in small ways at first. A hesitation before answering a question. An inability to meet Elena's clear, trusting gaze for more than a few seconds. She began to find excuses to shorten their time together, claiming headaches or forgotten duties, unable to stand the warmth of Elena's affection, which felt like a fire scorching her deceitful skin. One evening, Elena gave her a gift. It was a small, exquisitely embroidered pouch for carrying herbs, the stitches so fine they looked like painting. On it, she had sewn a tiny, perfect lavender blossom. "For you," Elena said, her expression soft. "Because you always make me laugh about your burnt cabbage potions. And because you are the dearest friend I have ever known." Cassandra took the pouch, the soft silk cool against her trembling fingers. The simple, heartfelt gratitude was more devastating than any accusation. She felt a wave of self-loathing so intense it made her dizzy. She was a fraud, a thief stealing this woman's trust. The king's gold had bought her family's future, but it had cost her integrity, her honor, and now, it was poisoning the only true friendship she had found in this cold, heartless court. She knew she had to confess. The lie was a cancer, and it would eventually destroy everything. It was better to cut it out, no matter how much it hurt, than to let it fester. The thought of Elena's face when she learned the truth was a torment, but the thought of continuing the deception was a hell she could no longer endure. She had to tell her. It was the only honorable thing left to do. 2 weeks after the gift of the embroidered pouch, a period during which Cassandra's guilt had become a constant, physical ache, she sought out the king. She found him in the armory, inspecting a newly forged sword, the firelight gleaming on his dark hair. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice strained. "I must speak with you." Sebastian looked up, his expression one of mild surprise. He set the sword aside. "Lady Cassandra, is there a problem?" "There is," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "The arrangement. Our arrangement concerning the Queen. It must end." A frown creased his brow. "End? Why? Has something happened? Is Elena not happy?" "She is happy," Cassandra said, the words tasting like ash. "She is happy because she believes she has found a true friend. She is happy because she trusts me. And that is precisely the problem." Sebastian's eyes narrowed. He did not understand. "You have done exactly what I asked of you. You have performed your duties admirably." The word duties struck her like a slap. "It is no longer a duty to me, Your Majesty. I care for her. Genuinely. And I cannot continue to deceive her. It is dishonorable. It is cruel. She deserves the truth." "The truth?" Sebastian's voice was dangerously low. "The truth is that my wife was miserable, and now she is not. The truth is that my court shunned her, and you have given her solace. The truth is that revealing the mechanics of that solace would destroy her. It would not be a kindness, Lady Cassandra. It would be an act of profound cruelty." He truly believed it. He saw the situation with such infuriating, masculine logic. Problem: loneliness. Solution: companionship. Result: happiness. He saw the revelation of his methods as an unnecessary complication that would undo the successful outcome. He could not see the nuance, the emotional reality that the foundation of that happiness was a lie, and that a house built on sand could not stand. "She would be humiliated," he continued, his voice hardening into a command. "She would believe her loneliness was so pitiful that I had to purchase a companion for her. She would think that the friendship she treasures was nothing more than a transaction. It would break her heart, and it would break her pride. Is that what you want?" "What I want," Cassandra countered, her voice trembling with the force of her conviction, "is to stop lying to the person I care about most in this world. She has a right to know who her friends are." "Truly are. Her friends?" Sebastian scoffed, a flicker of his ancient arrogance showing through. "Look around you, my lady. She has no friends in this court but you. And you are her friend because I willed it. Do not undo my work. Do not destroy the peace I have bought for her." "You didn't buy peace," Cassandra whispered, horrified by his blindness. "You bought a beautiful illusion. And it is about to shatter. I have to tell her. You will not." The words were not a suggestion, they were an edict. The air in the armory grew cold, heavy with his power. "You will continue as you have. You will maintain your friendship with the Queen, and you will never speak a word of our arrangement. You are bound by your word, and you are bound by my command. I forbid it. Do you understand me?" Cassandra stared at him, at the king who loved his wife so much he was willing to build her a cage of beautiful lies to protect her. He thought he was shielding her from pain, but he was merely postponing a greater devastation. And he was making her the instrument of that betrayal. She lowered her eyes, defeated by the weight of his royal will. Yes, Your Majesty. But in her heart, a different promise was made. He could forbid her, but he could not stop her. The lie had become more painful than any punishment he could devise. She would have to defy her king. The consequence was uncertain, but the cost of her silence was a price she was no longer willing to pay. The confession came on a Tuesday. The sky was a placid, cloudless blue, and the air held the first true warmth of spring. Elena was in high spirits. She and Cassandra were arranging flowers in the Queen's solar, the scent of hyacinth and narcissus filling the room. Elena was humming a light, cheerful tune, her fingers deftly weaving the stems together. "Sebastian is finally taking me to see the southern coast next month," she said, her eyes shining. "He says the sea is warmer there. Can you imagine? A sea that doesn't threaten to freeze you solid." Cassandra stood frozen, a white narcissus in her hand. This was it. This perfect, happy moment. This was what she was about to destroy. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She could not do it. She could not. "That's wonderful, Elena," she said, her voice sounding thin and strange to her own ears. Elena turned, her smile faltering as she saw Cassandra's expression. "Cassandra? What is it? You look as though you've seen a ghost." Cassandra's throat closed. The king's command echoed in her mind. "I forbid it." But then she saw Elena's face, so full of open, honest affection, and the lie was a physical weight in her stomach. "Elena, there is something I must tell you." She led her to the settee by the window, her hands icy cold despite the sunlight streaming in. Elena sat, her expression shifting from concern to confusion. Cassandra did not sit. She knelt on the floor before her friend, an act of supplication, of preemptive penance. "Whatever it is, you can tell me," Elena said softly, placing a hand on Cassandra's arm. The touch was warm and trusting. It was unbearable. Cassandra took a deep, shuddering breath. "Our friendship," she began, the words tearing their way out of her. The way it began, it was not by chance. Elena's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "The king," Cassandra whispered, unable to look up from the floor. "He saw that you were lonely. He wanted to help. So he summoned me." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Elena's hand was still on her arm, but it felt heavier now, its warmth gone. "He summoned you?" Elena repeated, her voice a careful, neutral tone. "He offered to forgive my family's debts. To restore our fortunes." Cassandra forced herself to look up, to meet Elena's eyes, to let her see the wretched truth on her face. "He paid me, Elena. He paid me to be your friend." The words fell into the sunlit room and shattered the world. Elena's hand drew back from her arm as if it had been burned. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin as pale as marble. She stared at Cassandra, her eyes wide with a dawning horror that was far worse than the anger Cassandra had expected. "Paid," Elena said. The word was not a question. It was a statement. A final, dead thing. At first, Cassandra rushed to explain, tears streaming down her face now. "Only at first. Elena, you must believe me. It became real. Everything we shared, the laughter, the walks, all of it became real for me. I care for you more than I can say. I tried to tell the king, I begged him to let me end the arrangement, to let me tell you, but he forbade it. He thought he was protecting you." But Elena wasn't listening to the desperate justifications. Her mind had seized on the core, inescapable fact. Purchased companionship. She was paid. The entire time. The last 6 months of her life, the first happiness she had known in this kingdom, had been a lie. A transaction. A service rendered. Her loneliness had not just been observed, it had been diagnosed as a problem and solved with coin. She was not a person to be known, but a predicament to be managed. The shame was a physical sensation, a hot, creeping tide that rose from her stomach to her throat, choking her. She felt pathetic. A creature so pitiable, so unable to inspire genuine affection, that her husband had to hire someone to tolerate her company. Every shared laugh was now a performance. Every moment of comfortable silence was a paid duty. The beautiful, embroidered pouch in Cassandra's possession was a tip for a job well done. The devastation was absolute. It was not just the betrayal of a friend, it was the confirmation of her deepest, most painful insecurity, that she was fundamentally unlikable, an outsider who could not earn a place on her own merits. She rose from the settee, her movements stiff and jerky, like a marionette whose strings had just been cut. She looked at the vibrant, beautiful flowers they had been arranging, symbols of a spring that now felt like a mockery. "Get out," she said. Her voice was hollow, devoid of all emotion. It was a terrifyingly empty sound. "Elena, please," Cassandra sobbed, reaching for her. "Do not touch me," Elena said, flinching away. The command held the cold, absolute authority of a queen. "Leave. Now." Cassandra stumbled to her feet and backed away, her face a mask of misery. She had known it would be bad. She had never imagined a pain this quiet, this profound. She had destroyed the one good thing in her life, and in Elena's. She turned and fled the room, leaving the queen standing alone amidst the scent of dying flowers, the beautiful illusion shattered into a million pieces around her. The confrontation with Sebastian was not fiery. It was glacial. Elena found him in his study, the same room where the sordid transaction had been arranged. She stood in the doorway, not entering, as if the very air of the room were contaminated. He looked up from his papers, a welcoming smile on his face, a smile that died when he saw her expression. "Elena, what's wrong?" "She told me," Elena said. Her voice was flat, each word a carefully placed stone. "Cassandra. She told me about your arrangement." Sebastian rose from his chair, his face a mixture of shock and dawning dread. "Elena, I can explain." "Can you?" she asked, a single, humorless laugh escaping her. "Can you explain why you thought the appropriate response to my loneliness was to purchase a companion for me, as one might buy a lapdog to keep a child from being bored? Did you think so little of me? Or did you think so little of friendship itself?" "I was trying to help," he insisted, his voice rising. He took a step toward her, but she held up a hand, and he stopped. The gesture was a wall between them. "I saw you were unhappy. I saw how they treated you. I couldn't bear it. I did it because I love you." "No," she said, and the quiet certainty in that single word silenced him. "You did it because you could not bear the inconvenience of my unhappiness. You saw a problem and you threw money at it, because that is what kings do. You did not try to understand the problem. You did not try to fix the reason I was lonely. You did not address your court's prejudice, their endless, subtle cruelties. You simply hired someone to distract me from it." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were filled not with anger, but with a profound and weary disappointment. "You did not see me, Sebastian. You saw a project to be managed. You took my deepest vulnerability, my most private pain, and you turned it into a state secret, a business transaction. The shame you have caused me, it is a wound I don't think will ever heal. You did not protect me. You humiliated me in the most complete and inventive way imaginable." He had no answer. Every word she spoke was the truth, a truth he had been willfully blind to. He had been so proud of his clever, kingly solution, and all he had done was build a more elaborate prison for her. "I am leaving," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I am going home. To my family's estate. I need to be somewhere where the air is not for sale. I need to be with people whose affection does not come with an invoice." "Elena, no, please," he begged, the king forgotten, now just a man terrified of losing his wife. "We can fix this. I will fix this." "There is nothing to fix," she said, her voice utterly final. "You have already paid for the service. It has been rendered. The transaction is complete." She turned and walked away, her back straight, her steps even. He did not follow. He stood in his study, the silence of the castle pressing in on him, and for the first time, he felt the edge of the profound loneliness he had tried to cure in her. He had not just made a mistake, he had committed an act of catastrophic emotional failure. He had loved her, and he had fundamentally, unforgivably, misunderstood her. The emptiness of the castle without her was immediate and absolute. It was the sound of his own heart breaking. The weeks that followed Elena's departure were the longest of Sebastian's life. The castle, once a place of power and order, felt like a hollow tomb. Her absence was a palpable presence in every room. Her scent no longer lingered in their chambers. The sound of her laughter was gone from the halls. The vibrant splash of her humanity, which had brought color to his grey, immortal world, had vanished. He was left with the cold, silent perfection of his court, and he had never hated it more. He spent the first week in a state of self-recriminating despair. He replayed their final conversation in his mind, Elena's words echoing in the silence. "You did not try to fix the reason I was lonely." The accusation was the heart of the matter. He had seen her pain as a symptom to be treated, not a wound inflicted by the very environment he ruled. He had put a bandage on a festering infection, proud that the surface looked clean while the poison spread beneath. His court, he realized with a sickening clarity, was the problem. Its rigid hierarchies, its casual dismissal of mortality, its subtle, unthinking cruelty born of timeless arrogance. He had allowed it. He had presided over it for centuries, so accustomed to its nature that he had not seen it for what it was, unwelcoming, stagnant, and hostile to the very life his wife embodied. He had tried to buy a shield for Elena instead of demanding his court lower its swords. That was the moment his grovel truly began. Not with letters of apology, which he knew would be meaningless words, but with action. He understood now that to win her back, he could not simply promise to be better. He had to build a world she would want to return to. He had to change the system that had rejected her. His first act was to send a royal delegation to Elena's family, not with a request for her return, but with an invitation. He formally invited her younger sister, Beatrice, to take up permanent residence at Ethelgard as a guest of the crown, with her own household and title. It was not a gesture for Elena, it was a structural change. It was him acknowledging that Elena needed a piece of her own world, her own family, embedded within his. Genuine companionship, not purchased. Next, he addressed the court itself. He called a grand assembly, and for the first time in his reign, his words were not about treaties or taxes. They were about culture. He spoke of the Queen. He did not mention his own failing, but he laid bare theirs. He spoke of their duty not just to obey, but to welcome. He announced the formal creation of the Queen's household, an independent body within the court, with its own budget, staff, and chambers, to be run entirely at the Queen's discretion when she returned. He made it clear that service in the Queen's household would be a position of high honor. He was giving her power. He was giving her agency. He was carving out a space in his world that would be unequivocally hers, to be filled with people she chose. He then began the quiet, more difficult work of dismantling the subtle architecture of their exclusion. He held smaller gatherings, dinners, and musical evenings, and he made a point of discussing human art, human history, human philosophy. He brought in human scholars and musicians. He began to intentionally weave the mortal world into the fabric of his immortal court, signaling that Elena's culture was not a quaint curiosity, but a valid and valued part of their kingdom's life. As for Cassandra, she had retreated to her newly restored family estates, expecting exile or worse. Instead, a royal messenger arrived with a single, unsigned note. It contained one word: stay. Sebastian understood that his own forgiveness was irrelevant. Cassandra's fate was in Elena's hands, as it should be. But he knew that if Elena ever returned, she would need to see Cassandra there, unpaid, her presence a choice, not a contract. The possibility of rebuilding that friendship had to exist, and it could only exist in a world free of their transaction. So Cassandra remained, a ghost at the edge of the court, waiting for a judgment that might never come. 5 weeks after she had left, a letter arrived for Elena at her family estate. It was not a plea for her return. It was a simple, factual account from her sister, Beatrice, who had arrived at Ethelgard a week prior. Beatrice wrote of the king's kindness, of the beautiful chambers she had been given, of the strange but earnest efforts the vampire courtiers were making to speak with her. She wrote of a court in the midst of a quiet, seismic shift. She ended the letter with a simple line: "It is different here now, Elena. I think you would like it." It was the first crack in the wall of Elena's grief. He hadn't just apologized. He had listened. He had understood. He had started to change the world that had hurt her. 6 months after her departure, Elena returned. She did not arrive with the fanfare of a returning queen, but quietly, at dusk, with a small retinue. Sebastian met her in the courtyard. He did not rush to her, did not touch her. He simply stood and waited, his face etched with a humility she had never seen on him before. "Welcome home, Your Majesty," he said, his voice quiet. The court she re-entered was not the same one she had fled. The changes were subtle, but profound. At the welcome dinner that evening, Lady Serafina, the same woman who had once silenced a room with her dismissal, approached her. She did not offer a hollow compliment, but asked a thoughtful question about a book of poetry from Elena's homeland that the king had recently introduced to the royal library. The conversation was not effusively warm, but it was respectful. It was genuine. She saw her sister, Beatrice, seated not at a forgotten corner table but in a place of honor, laughing with one of the younger vampire lords. She looked happy. She looked like she belonged. And in the corner of the room, standing alone, was Cassandra. She was paler, thinner, but she was there. She met Elena's gaze for a brief second, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear, before looking away. She was not part of the receiving line. She made no move to approach. Her presence was a silent question, not a demand. After the dinner, Sebastian walked with her to the newly appointed chambers of the Queen's household. It was a magnificent suite of rooms, larger and more beautiful than her old ones. "This is yours," he said simply. "To staff as you see fit. To run as you wish." Beatrice has already been helping with the preparations. He gestured to a small desk, on which sat a list of names, human and vampire alike, candidates for her new staff. "The choice is yours. Completely." Elena looked around the room, at the tangible evidence of his work. He had not tried to erase his mistake. He had tried to build a better world in its place. He had not just asked for forgiveness, he had done the work to earn it. He had finally understood that her belonging was not something he could purchase for her, but a reality he had to construct with her. He had changed the system. "Thank you, Sebastian," she said, and the words were not forgiveness, not yet, but they were the beginning of it. They were an acknowledgement. An opening. He nodded, accepting the gift of that small beginning. "She is waiting in the gardens," he said softly. "If you wish to see her." He left her then, giving her the space to make her own choice. Elena stood for a long moment, then walked to the balcony, looking down into the moonlit gardens. She saw a lone figure standing by the rose bushes. Cassandra. Elena walked down the stone steps into the cool night air. Cassandra saw her and tensed, looking as if she might bolt. Elena stopped a few feet away from her. The silence between them was heavy with 6 months of pain and regret. "The pouch you were given," Elena said, her voice even. "It was a gift. For a friend." Cassandra flinched, but she did not look away. "I know. Friendship cannot be bought," Elena continued, "and it cannot be commanded. It must be chosen. Freely." Tears welled in Cassandra's eyes. "I know that now," she whispered. "I am so sorry, Elena. More than words can say." Elena looked at her for a long time, at the genuine remorse etched on her face. The betrayal had been real. The pain had been immense. But the care, she realized now, had also been real, trapped and twisted within the lie, but real nonetheless. Here, in this new court, on this new ground, perhaps something honest could grow. "My sister tells me the lavender in the north garden is struggling," Elena said, her voice softer now. "She thinks the soil is wrong. I thought, perhaps, we could look at it together tomorrow. If you are not otherwise engaged." Relief and disbelief warred on Cassandra's face. A tentative, watery smile touched her lips. "I am not engaged. I would like that very much." It was not absolution. It was not a return to what they had been. It was something far more precious. It was a chance to begin again, on a foundation of truth. Elena turned and walked back toward the castle, toward the husband who was finally learning how to be her partner, toward the sister who was a piece of her own heart, and toward a future where she might, at long last, truly belong. The healing would be slow, but for the first time, it felt possible. The silence of the court was no longer a wait, but an quiet space, waiting to be filled with a new and better kind of sound.